Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about complex numbers. In this first video we're going to be talking about the imaginary unit I. So before in Algebra 1 when we were solving quadratics and we ended up with the square root of a negative number, we said there was no real solution. Well, we actually can have a solution for those, we just call it an imaginary solution. And we use the letter I for that imaginary number. And I is equal to the square root of -1. And so that means if I were to do I squared, it's equal to -1. And the reason that is because when I do square root of -1 times the square root of -1, you end up with -1. And this can be used to write the square root of any negative number. Some properties that it has is that for any real number a, the square root of -a is equal to I square root of -a. The reason that is because when I do the square root of -a, that's the same thing as -1 times a square root. And square roots have the property that you can separate it out, where this would be the square root of -1 times the square root of a. Well, the square root of -1 is just equal to 1. And so that's, or equal to I, and so you end up with I square root of a. And also for any real number a, if I were to do I square root of a squared, that's going to end up equaling -a. So let's go ahead and find square roots of negative numbers. For the first one, I have the square root of -25. Well, I can rewrite this to be the square root of -1 times 25. And again, I can split apart that square root to be square root of -1 times the square root of 25. Well, again, the square root of -1 is just equal to I. So I end up with I here. And then the square root of 25 is 5. And so I can flip that around to being this is equal to 5I. Okay, let's look at another one. Number 2, I have the square root of -72. So I can rewrite this to be the square root of -1 times the square root of 72. And so I know that the square root of -1 is just equal to I. Now I need to simplify the square root of 72. I want to go ahead and show two different methods that we have learned. The first one's the factor tree. So first I'm going to think, okay, what two numbers multiply to 72? I like to start with a smaller one, so 2 goes in there, and I can multiply by 36. 36 can be broken into 2 times 18, and then 2 times 9, and then 3 times 3. And so I'm looking to see what pairs I can take out. Well, I see I have a pair of 2s I can take out, and I have a pair of 3s I can take out. And so this ends up equaling 2 times 3 that I took out times I that's already out in front. And then I'm left with 1, 2 under the radical. So in other words, this is going to be 6I root 2. Another way that we could have done this, I'll do that in green here, is that you could have recognized that the square root of 72 is the same thing as the square root of 36 times the square root of 2, since 36 times 2 is 72, and then saw the square root of 36 is 6, and gotten 6I square root of 2. Either way works. Okay, looking at one last one. Here I have -5 times the square root of -9. Well, the square root of -9, I can rewrite that to being the square root of -1 times the square root of 9. Square root of -1 is just equal to I. The square root of 9 is equal to 3. And so multiplying those all out, I get -15I.